Marcus Aurelius wrote his most brutal self-assessments not for an audience, but because he knew something most men never admit: the people who want you to fail are watching you more carefully than anyone who loves you. Your friends see who you want to be. Your enemies see who you actually are. Your enemies have no incentive to flatter you, and that makes their perception more accurate. Abraham Lincoln famously kept his rivals inside his cabinet. Men like Salmon Chase and William Seward who openly doubted his intelligence and competence. Lincoln didn't exile them. He listened to them. Because he understood that a man who wants your seat will study every crack in your foundation. Chase thought Lincoln was weak, and that pressure forced Lincoln to sharpen arguments he never would have refined around loyal friends. The enemy's contempt became a whetstone. Flattery is a cognitive tax your friends unknowingly charge you. Every time someone softens feedback to protect the relationship, your self-image drifts further from reality. Your enemy pays no such tax. They have skin in the game, your failure. That incentive structure produces brutal accuracy. Epictetus called this distinguishing what is up to us from what isn't. Your reputation in someone else's mind is not up to you, but their unfiltered read of your weaknesses is information you can actually use. Criticism from enemies reveals the shadow self. Jung said you're hiding from yourself. Theodore Roosevelt was publicly mocked early in his career as a fragile, asthmatic, overeducated weakling who played at politics. His critics weren't entirely wrong, and Roosevelt knew it. Instead of defending against the image, he went to the Dakota Badlands, ranched cattle, hunted grizzlies, and rebuilt himself physically and psychologically. He didn't silence his critics. He used their map of his weakness to find the territory he needed to conquer inside himself. Carl Jung argued that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge don't disappear, they get projected outward and eventually find someone willing to name them. When an enemy attacks your character, filter out the venom and ask, what grain of truth exists here that my friends are too polite to say? That question is uncomfortable. It's also one of the highest leverage questions a man can sit with. The shadow doesn't go away when you ignore it. It grows. Your enemies test your values under pressure, your friends only see them in comfort. Viktor Frankl's entire psychological framework, logotherapy, the search for meaning, was not built in a seminar room. It was stress-tested inside Auschwitz. The guards, the system, the dehumanization, every force designed to break him became the crucible that proved what he actually believed versus what he merely professed. His captors thought they were destroying him. They were, without knowing it, constructing the man who would later teach millions how to survive suffering. Seneca wrote that adversity is the proving ground of great men, not the comfortable life. A friend who agrees with your worldview confirms a belief. An enemy who actively challenges it, who tries to make you act against your stated values, that is a live test of whether you actually hold those values or just perform them. The man who stays composed when someone is trying to humiliate him has learned something about himself that no amount of supportive conversation could have taught. Your enemies reveal your reputation, not the one you want, the one you've actually built. Niccolò Machiavelli spent years observing the courts of Italian city-states. His central insight in The Prince wasn't about becoming ruthless, it was about perception versus reality in power. The men who lost their positions almost always lost them because their reputation among rivals, not friends, had degraded without their knowing it. Cesare Borgia's enemies feared him because his reputation for follow-through was airtight. When he said something, it happened. His friends loved him. His enemies respected him. Machiavelli argued the second group's opinion was the one that actually determined his fate. Your friends know your intentions. The world, including your enemies, only sees your actions. That gap between intent and impact is one of the most dangerous blind spots a man can carry. If three separate people who dislike you point to the same behavioral pattern, the odds that they're all simply wrong collapse quickly. Reputation is not what you think of yourself. It is the consistent signal others receive from your behavior over time. Enemies, because they're watching for weakness, are often the first to notice when the signal you're sending contradicts the man you think you are. Learning to extract intelligence from hostility is a form of psychological sovereignty, and most men never develop it. Schopenhauer lived most of his life convinced the world was indifferent to his work. He was publicly dismissed by Hegel's followers, ignored by academic institutions, and spent decades in intellectual isolation. But instead of seeking validation, he kept refining. The hostility of the philosophical establishment, their active effort to marginalize him, forced him into a clarity of argument that required no external approval to sustain. By the time the world caught up, he had already become exactly what he set out to be, not despite the opposition, but through it. Kierkegaard wrote about the difference between despair that knows itself and despair that doesn't. Most men who can't handle criticism are in the second category. They experience the sting without understanding what it's teaching them. The man who develops the discipline to receive hostile feedback without collapsing, who can separate the attack from the information embedded in it, that man has built what the Stoics called an inner citadel. Not a wall to keep criticism out. A filter to extract the useful signal and discard the noise. That capacity is rare. And it compounds. Here's what we covered. 1. Your enemies have no reason to flatter you, which makes their perception of your flaws more accurate than almost anything your friends will tell you. 2. What they criticize most harshly often maps directly onto the shadow, the parts of yourself Jung said you're actively avoiding. 3. Hostile pressure doesn't just test your values, it reveals whether you actually hold them or just think you do. The men in history who became formidable, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Frankl, Borgia, Schopenhauer, didn't just survive opposition. They used it as intelligence. That's the move. Not to seek enemies, not to enjoy conflict, but to stop treating criticism from hostile sources as something to defend against and start treating it as data about the gap between who you are and who you intend to be. That gap is where the work is. If this hit something real for you, subscribe. We drop one of these every Tuesday and Friday. Philosophy and psychology, applied to how men actually live. No fluff, no performance, just the hard questions worth sitting with. Hit the bell if you want it in your feed. See you Tuesday.